What's up guys, Asian here with another PTS video. This is going to be the first one after the 5.3.2 patch, and this answers the big question whether or not Aegis Caller is still going to be decent to use on AoE pulls. So we're not going to really be covering single target potential of the set. Generally speaking, I think it's already widely regarded that Lokkestiiz is obviously stronger than it. And in single target situations, you're probably going to want to use Reliquant anyways instead of Aegis Caller. Aegis Caller by design seems to be much more of an AoE set, and at best it's probably going to be sort of bridging that gap between decent single target and really good AoE DPS. So we're really focusing in more on the cleave potential of Aegis, comparing that to another very popular cleave set, New Moon Acolyte. So you can probably guess what my testing scenario was based on what you guys can see behind me here. I have the trial dummy here, and this is just to give me all of my buffs. So this is just to standardize the buffs. Plus, I'm assuming that we are running Lokkestiiz for trash fights. That's pretty much standard for pretty much any trash pull, regardless of whether you're running Lokkestiiz on the front bar like I have with this setup, or Lokkestiiz on the body. Now I did test Aegis Caller and New Moon Acolyte both as body sets and as front bar sets. I did a total of 6 tests, so I did 3 different scenarios just to kind of give a comparison between each of the different possible scenarios out there. But generally speaking, the one set that I kept consistent was Lokkestiiz. So for 2 of these tests, I had Lokkestiiz as the front bar set here. Then for 4 of them, I had them as the body set, and then I basically swapped Aegis Caller or New Moon Acolyte as the front bar set. We went for a more traditional cleave setup here, so we used a Maelstrom bow here, and then I used Veldreth. Normally you would use Marsalok, but I just want to stick with Veldreth in order to kind of get rid of the whole sort of bashing sort of component behind it, because I'm not very good using Marsalok just yet. So you can see here, I basically had a bunch of 3 million HP target dummies all around the target dummy. So I did single target the trial dummy here and basically allowed my cleave to more or less hit all the other dummies around it. Now, I did try to standardize exactly where I was standing, so if you guys see this sort of line here in the stone, this is pretty much where I stood the whole time. That was just so, there might be instances where if I'm standing up closer, I might not be able to hit things to the side and so on, so I just kind of standardized it and just stood here for all the tests. Now, because a lot of the dots were residual, I basically more or less timed it. So for 2 of the tests, I basically said once my combat timer reached 1 minute on down the lower left hand corner, I basically backed off, let all my dots run out, let Aegis Caller run out, and then just took the time from there. The 2 other tests I did were more long term, so at 2 minutes I did that. I basically backed up and let all my dots run out. So that's we're kind of testing scenario. So if you guys want to repeat this for yourself, you certainly can do so, or you can try to find a different testing scenario here, because this one, by and large, you're not going to have this many ads. So you have one giant ad and then a bunch of small ads. Most trash pulls aren't going to be this big, and for a lot of trash pulls, you're obviously not going to have this many 3 million target dummies around you. You're probably going to have 3 or 4 big ads that have like 2 to 4 million health, and maybe a couple of 6-figure health smaller ads, maybe 500, 600k health. So this is a fairly unrealistic, but this does test out sustained AoE DPS. So that's kind of why I did 2 timed tests. I did one for 1 minute, one for 2 minutes, that kind of contrast a little bit behind really bursty AoE fights that's the 1 minute long versus the longer drawn out AoE fights, which would be the 2 minute long. You could also do a 30-second long just to kind of see like really short bursty kind of like dungeon type pulls, but at those time frames it doesn't really seem really worthwhile to really compare the 2 sets, because the fights would be just so short. So I didn't bother testing out 30 seconds, although it is something to consider that a lot of trash pulls, particularly in 4-man content, tend to be very quick, on the order of sub 30 seconds. So at that point, it's kind of like, well, is there really a point in testing them out anymore? Really not that big of a deal once you're starting to get sub 30-second trash fights. Now, before we go into the numbers, I do want to point out Aegis Caller does have a fatal drawback that you might want to consider if you are considering running Aegis Caller as a trash set, and it's that the Aegis Caller, when it is summoned, it cannot move. So if the trash for whatever reason ends up moving out of the stack position, out of the Aegis Caller's cleave, then you're not going to be able to get that damage going in. So, this sort of set is designed around making sure your tank has everything in a central spot and you know where that spot is, so you're not unnecessarily proccing the set before the stacks happens and so on. So it does require a little bit of coordination, a little bit of sort of situational awareness if you are going to be running Aegis Caller. But here are the 6 results that I got here. We're going to start up here. This is the 2-minute long test. So again, I basically ran the timer up until 2 minutes, then I backed off and just let all the dots run out here. So that's why the times are a little bit different here. So this was with Aegis Caller, so we pulled a total cleave damage of 383.2. Now I do also want to point out the regen versus drain per second here, 133.2 versus 133.7. And if we go ahead and take a look at our overall resources, as the green bar here, we never really dropped too far below 25% here. This is obviously where I stopped putting things out, doing it, and just sort of like let everything fall off here. Versus this one here is with New Moon Acolyte. So this is running them as front bar sets. So these 2 tests are front bar. These are the long duration sustained AoE fights here. 367.7. So 383 versus 367, and one of the big things here is note the sustain right around here, so around 150. That's where you start hitting 0, and I did have to heavy attack a few times here in order to get things going. So you see I did 3 heavy attacks just to make sure I didn't drop too low. So New Moon Acolyte, even if as a front bar set you are still feeling that sustained burn of 8% additional increase in cost. Now this can obviously be offset. I'm on a stamp work, so I could have run something like Dark Exchange, but I decided not to here, just to kind of give a more accurate comparison between what you would actually do in trash fights in trials. The next test here, this is again with New Moon Acolyte, but this is the shorter test. This is 1 minute long, so 340k. Then Aegis Caller here, 372k, and this time the fights are about the same. So you see active combat here about 120 to 122, so a little bit closer here. Here it's quite a bit different, so 229 to 221, but I don't think even if we gave New Moon Acolyte the additional 8 seconds, I don't think we'd be able to beat out Aegis Caller here for cleave. So again, big cleave here, and for sustain, not huge because it's a shorter fight here. Even with New Moon Acolyte, we were doing okay. I would be a little bit hesitant to say, go any further than this. We saw the 2 million test here did hit 0 around 145 or so. So a little bit iffy here, but still Aegis Caller pulls ahead here with the 1 minute test here as a front bar. Now these next 2 tests are as a body set, so Aegis Caller, New Moon Acolyte on the body. This one here is with New Moon Acolyte, and this is again a 1 minute long, so at 1 minute I decided to back off, so 126.7 was the total in combat time, 318. And then here is with Aegis Caller, 346, and again sustain here, not an issue with Aegis Caller because of that additional resource bonus. And then with New Moon Acolyte, definitely a lot harder on sustain. If we were going to do a 2 minute long test, we'd probably end up seeing similar results to the 2 minute long test when we had them as front bar sets here, with Aegis Caller pulling out ahead here. So it does seem like Aegis Caller is still going to be a very solid set to run for AoE cleave, especially even in burst scenarios. I wouldn't really call this a burst. I'd call this relatively short burst fights for about 1 minute long. It still seems like we're doing pretty well. And do keep in mind that we aren't getting additional penetration here with Aegis Caller, so we're sitting at 476 for physical penetration versus 5963 with New Moon Acolyte. So even with the advantage of additional physical penetration, Aegis Caller is still pulling ahead in terms of overall damage. So I'd say even though Aegis Caller did get a nerf, I'd say for cleave, it is definitely still one of the strongest sets that you can run as a stamina DPS for cleave. I would still recommend farming for Aegis Caller once Herald Storm goes live, assuming that no other changes happen with Aegis Caller. It's still a pretty strong cleave set. Now, the changes do make it a little bit weaker for single targets, so this would be strictly only for AoE trash pulls. For single target boss fights, you're still probably going to want to go with Reliquin and Lokkestiiz, or if you do want some cleave there, you'd probably still want to potentially do New Moon Acolyte and Lokkestiiz. But for just pure trash fights, Aegis Caller is still looking pretty strong here, so I'd still recommend farming for it once this goes live, assuming that it's not nerfed further in 5.3.3 and beyond. But that concludes this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative. Let me know down in the comment section below if there's anything else you would like me to test. I will be going over single target tests with the new Aegis Caller as well, so be on the lookout for that over the next few days. But do let me know if there's anything else you want me to take a look at. But again, that concludes this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.